The morning my mother told me I was too selfish to be her daughter, she was standing in my kitchen, drinking coffee from my mug, in the house I had paid for, alone, for 9 years. She said it like it was obvious, like I was supposed to nod, agree, find somewhere else to sleep. And the thing is, I almost did. I almost just left quietly, like I always had, like I had been trained to. But something stopped me that morning. Not anger, not pride, something colder than both. A single thought, clear as winter light. If I walk out this door without finishing what I've already started, they win, and they don't even know I've already started. Stay with me. Because what I did next, I am still not sure whether to call it justice or survival. Maybe both. And before this story is over, you will understand exactly why I did not say a single word at that kitchen table. Why I just nodded, stood up, and walked out the door. Because the most powerful move I ever made in my life was one nobody saw coming, including me. My name is Renee. I'm 34 years old, and I grew up understanding one thing very clearly about my family. I was the one who figured things out, not in a celebrated way, not in the way that gets you praised at Sunday dinners or called on the phone just to say, "Renee, I don't know what we'd do without you." In the quiet way, the invisible way, the way that just meant if something needed doing and nobody else stepped up, it was going to land on me, without thanks. Without anyone even noticing it had been done at all. My brother Darnell is 4 years older than me. He is charming in the way that makes people give him things they didn't plan to give. He walks into a room, and people want to like him. He has a smile that makes you feel like you are the only person he sees. I used to admire that about him when we were small. Later I understood it differently. My mother Gloria has always loved us both. I've never doubted that. But love and fairness are not always the same thing. She believed, since we were children, that the family weight should rest on Darnell's shoulders, because he was the son. That belief was never spoken out loud, but I felt it every single year of my life, in the small daily mathematics of who was asked to help, who was expected to be flexible, who was consistently expected to make space. I stopped waiting for my circumstances to improve when I was 19, 2 jobs through community college, paralegal certification, a savings account built dollar by dollar, living in a studio so small, I had to move the dining table to open the bathroom door. When I was 25, my grandmother passed. She was the one person in my family who had ever really looked at me and said something I have never forgotten. I was 16, summer evening, her porch. She looked at me and said, "Renee, you are going to be all right, because you are the kind of person who does what needs doing." She left the house to the family, which in practice meant nobody wanted to deal with the probate paperwork, the back taxes, or the foundation issue in the northeast corner. Everybody loved the idea of the house. Nobody loved the reality of it. So I did what I always did. I paid the back taxes, out of my own savings, every dollar. I hired a structural engineer. I spent 2 months untangling the estate paperwork, 3 different versions of her will, none updated after my grandfather died. I got my name on the deed, and I moved in. That house became mine in every way that matters. I refinished the floors myself, weekends, on my knees, sawdust in my hair. I painted every wall. I fixed the bathroom tile that had been cracked since before I was born. I planted a garden along the south side. Tomatoes, herbs, marigolds along the border, because my grandmother had kept one there, and I wanted to remember her every time I looked out the kitchen window. For 9 years I paid the mortgage, every single month, the insurance, the property taxes. Every bill that came, everything that broke, I fixed. The water heater failed at midnight in January. Cold basement floor, wrench in my hand, no one to call. I fixed it alone. 9 years. I did not ask for help. That was the arrangement. Unspoken, but understood. The house was mine, and for 9 years that felt like enough. Darnell's divorce finalized in March. He called me on a Wednesday night. I'd just gotten home from a long day. Hadn't even taken my coat off yet. Standing in my kitchen with my keys still in my hand, he said, "Renee, I need a favor. Just for a few months. The kids need stability, and I need somewhere to land." He had 3 children, 8, 6, and 4. 2 girls and a boy. The youngest had my grandmother's eyes. I noticed that the first time I held him, 3 days after he was born. I want to be very clear about something. I love those children. This story is not about them. They were caught in the middle of something adults created, and none of what happened is on them. Not a single part. But when Darnell said a few months, I felt something in my stomach. Not suspicion exactly, more like recognition. The particular feeling you get when a situation rhymes with something that has already happened to you once before. I said yes, because he was my brother, because the kids needed somewhere stable, because I had a house with extra rooms, and because my mother called me the very next morning and said, "Renee, I know you have the space, and family is family." That phrase, family is family. I have heard it used to justify so many things in my life that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with convenience. But every time I hear it, something in me responds before my brain can catch up, like a reflex, trained into me young. They arrived on a Friday in April. Darnell, his 3 kids, 2 SUV loads of belongings, and my mother, who I had not invited, but who showed up anyway to help them get settled. She stayed 3 days. Then she went home. Then she came back the following weekend. Then the weekend after that. By June, my mother was spending 4 days a week at my house, using a key I had given her years ago for emergencies. In the beginning, Darnell was genuinely trying. He made dinner sometimes. He thanked me when he thought to. There was one Sunday in May, when he sat on the back step with a cup of coffee, looked at the garden and said, "Renee, you built something real here." I told myself, this will be fine. Then the asks started. Small at first. In May, could the kids have the guest room, the one I used as my home office? I moved my desk into my bedroom. Tight fit. I made it work. In June, could he set up a playset? Not on the south side, I said. Anywhere else. He put it near the fence. I told myself that was reasonable. Then in July, my mother told me, not asked, told me that the master bedroom was too much space for one person. Wouldn't it make sense for you to take the smaller room down the hall? I stood there, in my own kitchen, looking at her. Mom, this is my house. Renee, don't be like that. The children need. I paid the mortgage for 9 years. I have the deed. My name. Alone. She looked at me the way she sometimes does, like I was being technical about something that should be emotional, like pointing to facts is a form of cruelty. Family doesn't keep score, Renee. I did not move out of the master bedroom, but something had changed that day. Something quiet and permanent. The house that had been mine, completely, quietly mine, was being renegotiated around me. Room by room, inch by inch. August. A Saturday. I had gone for a run. My 1 hour a week that still felt entirely mine. I came home to find my mother and Darnell sitting at my kitchen table with a man I didn't recognize. He was in his 50s, neat clothes, a folder on the table. He introduced himself as a family property consultant. He had a business card. My mother looked up at me with an expression I can only describe as carefully arranged warmth. "Oh good, you're back. Come sit down, Renee. We've been working on something." I stood in the doorway, still in my running clothes, still catching my breath, looking at the 3 of them around my kitchen table like I was the guest. I sat down. What they had been working on was a co-ownership agreement, a formal legal document that would add Darnell's name to the deed of my house, equal shares, 50-50. The reasoning, as presented to me, was that Darnell was now contributing to the household, by which they meant he had paid 2 months of the electric bill and bought groceries on 2 occasions. I read every line. The consultant watched me read with the expression of someone who has been in this kind of meeting before and knows how it usually goes. I looked up. I'm not signing this. The silence in that kitchen was extraordinary. Renee, Darnell has 3 children. He has nothing right now. You would really sit there and Mom. I said it quietly, just clearly. He has nothing. I have a house, and this document would give him half of it in exchange for 2 months of electric bills. That is not fairness. That is something else entirely. The consultant gathered his folder and left, quietly, in the way people leave a room when the transaction has not gone as planned. My mother and Darnell sat across from me in silence, like I had done something unforgivable. Like I was the one who had brought a stranger to the kitchen table with a document already prepared. That night, after they had gone to sleep, I went to the kitchen, made tea, sat down. Something about that document had been wrong, in a way that went beyond the request itself. The language was too specific, the formatting too clean, the clauses too precisely worded for something supposedly drafted for an introductory meeting. It looked like a second draft, maybe a third. I thought about when it might have been started, and then I went to the one place in the house that still belonged entirely to me, my filing cabinet. I moved quietly. I did not turn on the overhead light. I pulled out my original title insurance file, the one I had not opened since I moved in. I sat on the floor. I started reading. The first 2 pages were standard. Property description. Coverage terms. On the 3rd page, the ownership history document. My name, the date of transfer, the notary stamp. And then, below mine, a second entry. A co-owner modification, supposedly filed 8 months ago, before Darnell had moved in, before his divorce had even finalized, before I had ever agreed to anything. A modification that added his name to the deed, with a notary date from the previous November. I stared at that date, November. Darnell had not arrived at my door until April. I had never signed any document modifying my ownership. I had never met any consultant before that morning. I had never received any notification from the county. Someone had filed a backdated co-owner modification on my house. My hands were completely still. I am not an attorney, but I work in a law office, and I have for 11 years. I understand how paperwork works, and I understood sitting on that floor in the dark, exactly what I was looking at. This was not something Darnell had decided on his own. Darnell is many things. A forger of legal documents is not one of them. This had been planned, carefully, over months. The meeting that morning, the consultant, the folder, the agreement already prepared, that was not the beginning of the plan. That was the closing move. I put the folder back. I went to bed. I lay in the dark in the master bedroom of the house I had paid for alone, and I stared at the ceiling. I did not feel panic. I did not feel rage. I felt something colder and more useful than either. I felt clarity. I spent the next 2 weeks working quietly, every lunch break, every evening after they'd gone to sleep. In my car, parked 2 blocks from the office. On my phone, I pulled the full chain of ownership from the county recorder's office, all publicly accessible, exactly where it was supposed to be. The modification was there, filed under a notary name not registered with any firm in the county directory. The signature, supposedly mine, had my legal first name, but the middle initial was wrong, 1 letter. Small enough to miss, large enough to invalidate the entire notarization under state law. Someone had attempted to forge my signature on a property deed, and they had done it badly enough that a paralegal paying close attention could see the flaw immediately, which told me something important. Either they expected I would never look closely, or they expected that by the time I did, it would be too late, that I would already have been pressured into signing something new. The forged filing was just a backstop, an insurance policy in case I tried to fight later. I called a real estate attorney the following Monday, someone referred by a colleague I trusted, someone across town, no connection to my firm, no connection to my family. She read for a long while without saying anything. Then she said, "This is a fraudulent filing, the wrong notary, the wrong middle initial, the missing county stamp. None of this holds up. Legally, your ownership has never been encumbered." She paused. "The question is, what outcome you want. You can pursue this criminally. You can file a civil action. You can go to the county and have the filing removed. You can confront them directly. Or," she stopped. "Or," I said, "or you use the fact that they don't know you know, and you make a move they're not expecting." I thought about standing in a room and being called selfish again. I thought about what it would look like to fight this publicly. My mother crying, Darnell looking wounded, everyone deciding whose side to be on. And then I thought about something quieter, something that required no argument at all. I told my attorney what I wanted to do. She was quiet for a moment. "That's cleaner," she said, "and it is entirely within your legal rights. Let me walk you through the process." The Sunday before everything changed, my mother made a big dinner. Roasted chicken, greens, cornbread, peach cobbler, the whole family around the table, candles. The good dishes, mine, that I had bought at an estate sale 3 years ago. The kids dressed nicely, their hair done. It felt almost like it used to feel when I was small, warm, full, like something whole. My youngest niece climbed into my lap after the meal and fell asleep there, her head against my shoulder. I sat very still so I wouldn't wake her. I thought there was a version of this that could have been real. There was a version where he really only stayed a few months, found his footing, and Sunday dinners became something we chose, instead of something I was managing. But then my niece went to join her siblings, and my mother set a folder on the table, a new version of the co-ownership document. My name typed correctly this time. 2 signature lines. Darnell looked at me with the expression he had been practicing. The one that said, "I need you. I am humble. I am asking, not demanding. Ren, I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just need something to stand on. For the kids. My mother reached across the table and put her hand on mine. You're too selfish to be my daughter sometimes, Renee. I mean that with love, but you have to learn that family comes first. There it was. I looked at her hand on mine. I looked at the document. I looked at my brother's carefully arranged expression. I looked at the candles, the good dishes, the cobbler she had made. I understood, in that moment, the architecture of what had been built around me. The dinner was not generosity. It was staging. The flowers were not kindness. They were positioning. The warm evening, the sleeping child in my lap. All of it designed to make me feel that refusing would be the thing that broke something. They genuinely believed they had me cornered. They thought the only options available to me were to sign, or cause a scene, or leave. And here's the thing about being the person who always figures it out. Sometimes you have already figured it out. 3 weeks ago, in an attorney's office across town, with a check already deposited and a set of keys to a new apartment already in my bag. What they did not know, what I had not told them, was that I had sold the house 3 weeks earlier. When my attorney and I had discussed the options, she explained something important. The fraudulent filing had never taken valid legal effect. It existed in the records as an attempted modification, but without the required documentation, it had no weight. My name alone remained on the deed. I still owned my house. Completely, alone, with no legal obligation to inform anyone of my plans. So I listed it. Off-market. Quiet. My attorney connected me with a real estate agent who specialized in discrete transactions, a cash buyer, a small property investment firm. They were willing to move quickly for the right price. We had an accepted offer within a week. We closed in under 3 weeks. I want to tell you what the closing day felt like. I sat in the parking lot of the title office for 20 minutes after I signed the final documents. I thought about the floors, being on my knees on a Saturday morning, sander in my hands, sweat on my face, the way the wood had looked when I was done, warm and clean, and like something restored. I thought about the water heater at midnight in January, cold basement floor, wrench in my hand, no one to call. I thought about my grandmother, the way she had looked at me on that porch when I was 16. You are going to be all right. Because you are the kind of person who does what needs doing. I thought about the garden. Tomatoes in August, marigolds along the border. The particular smell of warm soil on a summer morning when I walked outside with my coffee before the day started. I had built something there, something real, and it had been mine. I did not cry. I sat in the parking lot and breathed, and let myself feel every bit of it. The grief of it, the rightness of it, the strange freedom of having made a decision that no one else had seen coming. The money went into an account that had nothing to do with my mother or my brother. I had already signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment across town. I had already moved the boxes that mattered. The closing terms included a standard 30-day occupancy window. That window expired in 5 days. So when my mother put her hand on mine and slid that document across the table, I felt something close to grief. Not for what was happening in that kitchen, for what it had once been. For what it could have been. I looked at my mother. I can't sign this document, Mom. Renee, not because I'm selfish, because the house is no longer mine to sign over. A pause. What does that mean? It means I sold it. The sale closed 2 Fridays ago. The silence in that room was different from any silence I have ever experienced. It was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of a plan, months in the making, carefully constructed, patiently executed. Suddenly encountering something immovable. My mother took her hand off mine, very slowly. You sold the house. Yes, without telling us. It was my house. I didn't need to tell anyone. What followed was the loudest my family had ever been in my presence. Accusations. I was heartless. I was vindictive. I had planned this to punish them. I had always been cold. I had always cared more about things than about people. I let them say all of it. I did not match their volume. I did not argue. I sat at the table that was no longer technically mine, and I waited, because I had one more thing to say, and I was waiting for the room to be quiet enough to say it. When there was finally a pause, I want to tell you something, not to argue, just so it said, clearly, once. I found the fraudulent filing on my deed, Darnell, the one with the wrong middle initial and the unregistered notary. I know what was planned. I know when it was filed. I know it predates your move-in by 5 months. I have not reported it yet. I have not filed anything with the county. I have not contacted law enforcement. I would like to keep it that way, and I believe we can, as long as the new owner's occupancy deadline is respected." The room changed. Darnell sat back down. My mother's expression shifted in a way I had never seen before in my life. Something behind her eyes recalculated. The certainty, that particular certainty she had carried for months, went out like a light. For the first time in a very long time, she was looking at me without knowing what I was going to do next. I told them the deadline. I told them the new owner's timeline. I told them I had already arranged and paid for a moving company. 2 full days of help. Not out of guilt, I said, because those kids had nothing to do with this. And I don't want them carrying boxes in October cold. Then I stood up. I took my coat from the hook by the door, and I left. A week later, Darnell called. Not angry. Something smaller than angry. Something almost like chastened. "Did you really find the filing?" "Yes." Silence. I didn't know Mom was going to go that far. I thought it was just going to be a conversation. I thought she was just going to talk to you. I believe him. Partially. I believe he knew something was being arranged. I believe he understood, somewhere, that it wasn't entirely clean, but not knowing the full shape of something you stand to benefit from is itself a kind of choice. A comfortable one. A convenient one. But a choice. I said that to him. Gently, not to wound him. Because I think, on some level, he needed to hear it said clearly. Darnell, not knowing the full extent of something you benefit from is still a choice. I think you know that. He didn't argue. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm sorry, Renee." 2 words. Simple ones. I don't know what they cost him, but he said them. "I hope you find somewhere stable for the kids." I said. "I mean that. I really do." My mother called 3 days after they moved out. She called to tell me I had destroyed the family. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. I did not explain. At the end, I said, "Mom, I need to ask you something. The morning you told me I was too selfish to be your daughter, do you remember what you were holding?" Silence. "Your coffee mug. My coffee mug. In my kitchen. That I paid for, alone, for 9 years, while you had a key that you used whenever you wanted. I never stopped loving you. I want you to know that. I never stopped wanting to have a real family. But what was happening in that house was not family. It was something being taken, 1 room at a time, 1 document at a time, 1 family is family at a time. And I think somewhere in a place you haven't looked at yet, you know that." She didn't argue. She didn't agree. She hung up. We have spoken twice since then. Short, careful conversations. The kind where both people are aware of everything that is not being said. I know that I love her. I know that love and trust are not the same thing. And I know that when they stopped being compatible, I had to choose one. A few months after everything ended, I drove past the house. I don't know why. I wasn't planning to. I was just driving and I ended up on that street. And there it was. The new owners had put a tire swing in the front yard. 2 children's bicycles on the porch. Someone had repainted the front door, a warm red, which I never would have chosen, but which looked right. Like the house had moved on in the way that houses do when the right people are inside them. My grandmother's garden was still there, along the south side. Still growing, tended now by people who didn't know its history, who probably didn't know that a woman had planted it 30 years ago, and that her granddaughter had kept it going for 9 years after that, as a way of staying close to something she had lost. Someone planted that. Someone will tend it. The garden doesn't care who does. There's something about that I find unexpectedly peaceful. My apartment is small, 1 window in the kitchen. The radiator clears its throat every 20 minutes. I have a small pot of herbs on the windowsill, basil and thyme, the way my grandmother used to keep. They are growing slowly. They are improbably alive. Every morning I make coffee, in my own mug, in my own kitchen, which nobody else has a key to, and I think about what I learned. I learned that I had always confused loyalty with surrender. I had always believed that the most loving thing I could do was to make space, move over, give up the room, hand over the deed. I had been doing it my whole life, and I had done it so many times in so many small ways that by the time someone tried to do it legally, it almost felt normal. It was not normal. It was never normal. And the moment I understood that, really understood it, sitting on a cold tile floor at midnight with a title insurance folder in my hands, something in me stopped apologizing for taking up space, for having a name on a document, for owning something I had earned, for being a person who built something real and expected it to remain hers. The most powerful thing I ever did was not fight, not argue, not stand at a table and explain myself while someone decided whether my explanation was good enough. I removed myself from the situation so thoroughly, so quietly, so completely, so legally, that the people who had planned around me had to confront the space where I used to be. That space, the absence of someone who always showed up, always absorbed, always figured it out, always made room, that is louder than anything I could have said at that dinner table. She had thought she was calling about her daughter's house, and it turned out it had always been exactly that. Her daughter's house, and her daughter had decided, at last, what to do with it.